Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton tonight. As Boris Johnson gives imperiled Ukraine a military boost, should more Brits be grateful to have a steadfast and focused PM leading us through this crisis rather than leaving the fate of Europe in the doddery hands of Putin and Biden? I call for Russia lover Corbyn and his fellow lefty cranks in Labour to stop putting politics before peace in my digest. Then I'll get the thoughts of my superstar panel tonight. Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, social media activist Adam Brooks and political commentator Daisy McAndrew. Then, as Nadine Dorries orders an Ofcom review, should the TV channel Russia Today be taken off air for spreading propaganda? Tory grandee David Davis goes head-to-head with former Sunday Mirror editor Paul Connew in the clash. That's at 9:30 tonight. As ever, I want your thoughts too. You can email me at dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me at gbnews, and we've got a poll running there too. At 10:20, the lockdown inquiry continues. And tonight, the man who rocked number 10 by resigning in protest of the government's hardline COVID policies, former Brexit Minister Lord David Frost, gives valuable insight into the decision-making in Westminster, the obsession with Plan BS, and why on earth it took his shock departure to save us from a needless Omicron lockdown. Don't miss that. As unabashed lefty Emily Maitlis steps down from the BBC, Rod Liddell, who came under attack in one of her most egregious and damaging examples of biased broadcasting, reacts. The columnist extraordinaire is back and uncancelled at 10:40. By supporting Justin Trudeau's war on the Freedom Convoy, have the left exposed their contempt for blue-collar folk and betrayed their anti-establishment roots?
Hey! Stand down! Oh my gosh! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Look what you did!
Together, Declaration signatory Tonya Buxton investigates that in tonight's Outsider at 9:20. As promising news about the Queen's health emerges from Buckingham Palace, our future Queen Kate is winning hearts of the world in Denmark. Was there anything she can't do? And after a string of bad royal press, could it be the Duchess of Cambridge, who is the saviour of the royal family? Royal author Robert Jobson beams in from Copenhagen at 9:45. As Heathrow suffers its lowest passenger numbers in 50 years, is it time to end the testing and all the other travel restrictions on the unvaccinated? We'll discuss that, as well as Mrs. Brown's Boys star Brendan O'Carroll and whether he deserves to be cancelled for this joke.
Where we haven't had anybody his colour in there, so I don't know if we could have him in, but you know what?
We'll break down the day's biggest talking points in the media buzz at 10:30. Plus, of course, we'll reveal how tomorrow's newspapers are covering the Ukraine crisis throughout the show. And as ever, a brand new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass will be revealed before the end of the show. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. The masks are dropping, quite literally. Even the COVID hysterics, scheming Sturgeon in Scotland and London's failed mayor, Sadiq Khan, have quietly admitted defeat, with plans to drop muzzle mandates in shops and public transport. As ever, they criticised Boris Johnson for lifting restrictions. Then they followed suit within days. They are both truly pathetic for continuing to play politics with COVID restrictions. But now I implore the British Retail Consortium to follow suit after it said it was in no rush for its shops to remove ludicrous COVID measures like protective screens, hand sanitizers and masks for customers and staff members. Let me tell you, I won't shop anywhere that forces me to stay muzzled, and it makes me sick when I see retailers requiring their staff to spend 8 hours a day behind a restrictive cloth nappy that does absolutely nothing to stop Omicron transmission. And if you don't believe me, even the scientists now admit as much.
I think a lot of people will probably keep wearing masks for their own safety. A lot of people will decide that they don't want to wear masks, and I think that that's fine too. I don't think wearing masks indefinitely is necessarily going to help you. Though masks didn't really help us with Omicron, did it? I mean, you get a highly, highly infectious variant. Wear all the masks you like, it doesn't make any difference.
Stop the mask madness. It's over. Stand by for my superstar panel. Let's take a look at them tonight. The Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, the publican and campaigner Adam Brooks, and the political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. But before we hear from them, the news headlines at 9 with Tamsin Roberts.
Dan, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. A 30-day state of emergency has been declared in Ukraine, with the US warning Russia is ready to attack. Ukrainian troops are reinforcing the border, with the new American intelligence showing 80% of Russia's forces are in forward positions, suggesting an invasion is imminent. 2 separate convoys of military equipment have reportedly been seen moving towards Donetsk in eastern Ukraine. Russia's refusal to back down has led to further sanctions, the US targeting the company behind Nord Stream 2 and its corporate offices. Speaking at the United Nations in New York, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba urged the West to hit more and hit hard.
Ukraine has never planned and does not plan any military offensive in the Donbas. Neither any provocations or acts of sabotage, as Russia attacked the very fundamental principles of international peace and security.
EU leaders are due to hold an emergency summit on the crisis tomorrow. Here in the UK, the Prime Minister has announced further military support for Ukraine. Boris Johnson told MPs defensive weapons will be sent to Kiev as a result of Russia's increasingly aggressive behaviour.
I can announce to the House that in light of the increasingly threatening behaviour from Russia and in line with our previous support, the UK will shortly be providing a further package of military support to Ukraine. Yeah. This will include lethal aid in the form of defensive weapons and non-lethal aid.
Now, a rapist who carried his victim through Leeds before attacking her has been given a life sentence. Austin Ayasande was captured on CCTV walking through deserted streets with the woman in his arms in August 2015. He was only caught last September after assaulting another woman whilst working as a delivery driver. He's been jailed for life with a minimum term of 16 years. The UK is facing more bad weather with strong winds and heavy snow set to hit the UK this week. It comes after 3 storms battered the UK over recent days. 2 severe flood warnings are still in place for the River Severn, which has now peaked. Prince Harry has launched a High Court libel action against the publisher of the Daily Mail. Court papers show a claim has been made against Associated Newspapers, but it's not clear which title it's linked to. The Duke of Sussex is also currently bringing privacy claims against the publishers of The Sun and The Mirror. His wife Meghan previously won a case against Associated Newspapers after it reproduced parts of a letter to her estranged father, Thomas Markle. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now let's get straight back to Dan Wootton tonight.
It's the opposite of comforting that 2 leaders who look increasingly senile potentially hold world peace in their hands. You've got the doddery US President Joe Biden, who at 79, and amid speculation he could be plagued by dementia, was barely able to stumble through a scripted address on the Ukraine crisis, let alone rally the Western world behind him after his shameful Afghanistan withdrawal.
Last night, Putin authorized Russian forces to deploy into these regions. So let's begin to, I'm going to begin to impose sanctions in response. The world heard clearly the full extent of Vladimir Putin's twisted rewrite of history. But Russia has only escalated its threat against the rest of Ukrainian territory, including major cities and including the capital city of Kyiv. The United States and our allies and partners remain open to diplomacy. Probably have more to say about this as it moves on. I'm hoping diplomacy is still available. Thank you all very much.
Then there's tyrannical Wootton, who is a decade younger than Biden but has been branded by the jailed Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny as a senile, drunk grandfather who would be funny if he wasn't in charge of the nuclear codes. Based on his fantastical and somewhat deranged recent addresses to rightly sceptical Russians, Navalny is not wrong.
First, I will start by saying that modern Ukraine was entirely created by Russia, by Bolshevik Communist Russia to be exact. This process began right after the 1917 revolution. Let me stress it again. Ukraine is not just a neighbouring country. It is an integral part of our history, culture and spiritual continuum. Grateful descendants have taken down Lenin's memorials in Ukraine. They call it decommunization. Do you want decommunization? Well, it fits us well, but there is no need to.
It's at this moment where the UK and the world actually should be grateful and relieved we have a steadfast and focused Boris Johnson in charge, not a Putin apologist like Jeremy Corbyn, who we must never forget Keir Starmer wanted to be Prime Minister at this moment. As Boris Johnson rightly pointed out today, Labour remains full of lefty cranks who believe NATO is the aggressor in this Putin-created mess.
I hear somebody on the opposite benches say that this is so far weak. It's not. It's strong. It's going to be very strong. Something that would be strong, Mr. Speaker, would be to take the whip away from the 14 members of the Labour Party who say that the aggressor in Ukraine is NATO. That would be a strong thing to do.
Corbyn retains significant sway in his party, with the Corbyn Peace and Justice Project tweeting, "Only dialogue will make a difference. This is the path that our own government must now pursue rather than stoking up endless conflict." That follows this exchange in the House between Corbyn, who of course now sits as an independent MP, and the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace.
Would he be prepared to countenance if the Russians pull back any reduction in the NATO presence on the border as well, in order to bring about a longer-term secure peace in the region?
We didn't put 165,000 combat troops on the edge of a sovereign country and hold a gun to the head of a democratically elected government. We didn't do that. Russia did that. We have nothing to de-escalate from. Russia does. And I do hope the right honourable gentleman might condemn the Stop the War coalition, who seems to always paint us as the aggressor. Maybe he'd like to go and ask the people of Ukraine what he actually thinks who the aggressor is.
Now, there has been much criticism, including from the Tory right, that Boris hasn't gone far enough with his sanctions package. But I trust the PM that this is only the beginning, with stronger financial punishments in reserve to be unleashed the further Putin goes down his crazy and totally unnecessary path. First to be targeted will be a larger group of Russian oligarchs and individuals close to Putin, and the UK will send more weapons to Ukraine in days. The hawkish Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has assured us nothing is off the table. That is the right approach. And while I like to keep politics out of sport wherever possible, I actually agree with Truss that British football clubs should boycott a potential Champions League final in St. Petersburg in May, given the perilous circumstances.
Should the football match go ahead in St. Petersburg, the UEFA final? What's your view? Yes or no?
No.
Simple as that. If an England team were to get through, should they boycott it?
If I was on the England team, I would boycott it. I would personally not want to be playing in a football match in St. Petersburg, given what the Putin regime is doing.
And you would urge the manager to consider a boycott were an English team to be successful in the stages to get to the final?
Yes.
The match must be moved to London. The British response has shamed that Russian appeaser with small man syndrome, Emmanuel Macron, and showed moral leadership to the world. Thank God Starmer didn't get his way, because we'd have a Putin-appeasing premier in Corbyn in place at number 10 Downing Street, and the ramifications for the world would have been truly catastrophic. To respond now, my superstar panel. The Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Plattel, the publican and campaigner Adam Brooks, and the political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. I mean, Amanda Plattel, there's a huge amount at stake here. But Biden, can we talk first about that moment where he just didn't even seem to have his faculties for a pre-written auto-cue speech where he took no questions?
I know, which he'd spent hours. Remember, it was delayed and delayed. And I kept thinking, I was watching it and thinking, oh, my Lord, we know this. You know, Daisy and I have done this. You've got your 2 auto cues there. All you have to do is look from one to the other to look as though you're still alive. Occasionally, he raised his hands just to prove that he was still alive. It was dreadful, and he even fluffed his best line. It was just... And we're just sitting there thinking, and what we're thinking, what the Russians will be thinking, this is the leader of the free world, as you said.
But he's been doing this for months.
Yeah, but it was so bad. This is like the most important thing he's ever had to do, and they could hardly get him off the stage in time.
Adam, you're worried about Biden too?
Well, I think it was obvious before the election. We knew he was possibly senile. You know,
you don't chuck around words like senile. He's
possibly senile.
He's just
his behaviour is erratic.
Well, I have chucked the word senile.
His behaviour is erratic.
And we have to talk about it, Amanda, in my view. We have to talk about it. This is the leader of the free world.
It is.
We're facing... And I don't like scaremongering, and hopefully Putin will see sense. But this is a man with nuclear codes, nuclear
but there's
weapons.
nothing you can do about it. You just have to accept he's not going to be, you know, unless he falls down dead, God forbid, you know, all the rest of it. Unless he falls down dead, he's the guy we've got. Thank God we've got Boris.
Well, of course, and that's the point. And that is the point. Because Daisy McAndrew, I know you think Boris hasn't gone far enough in terms of the sanctions, but I think what he has done is provide Europe and European leaders, he's shown that there needs to be courage against Putin.
I do think he has been better than I would have expected him to be. When he was Foreign Secretary, I think he was pretty awful, particularly when it came to knowing any details about anything. You know, he just sort of winged it, and you can't do that, you know, when you're in such a position of importance and authority. But he did really well at Munich last weekend.
Did you not choke saying that? Daisy, did you not choke saying Boris did pretty well? Come on.
There are things that I think he is good at, and being in the limelight is one of them. Knowing details is not one of them. But I've been reporting on dirty money and Russian money and oligarchs' money for more than 10 years, and literally nothing's changed. And everybody's been clamouring about it. Who look at these issues, who know how many billions of pounds has been funneled through London to wash dirty money from Russia. And the Treasury knows about it, constantly says that they'll do something, and then do absolutely nothing. So I think that does lead people like Putin to think, I can do whatever I want.
Doesn't Boris look best when he's channeling his Churchill?
I've just wrote down Churchill.
He's looking at my notes, Dan.
I just wrote down Churchill.
That is exactly... I want it on camera.
But you don't have your glasses today, so you don't know what you're reading.
I know what I wrote, because I wrote it.
That's his hero, isn't it?
Now, look, I want to show you three something, because there's an example of what has previously been a classic Russian propaganda tactic in this video. So Russian state TV has today claimed that this reporter came under Ukrainian fire. So you see it there.
Yeah.
With that small explosion conveniently, perfectly framed over his left shoulder. And one thing worth noting, this channel called The Star is run by none other than the Russian Ministry of Defence. Davey McAndrew, maybe they should call themselves False Flag TV.
Well, I was going to say, so we all are familiar with this expression, false flag, now, and it was really interesting a couple of weeks ago when the American intelligence services started sort of telling the world what they knew and saying there's going to be a false flag and there's going to be allegations of some sort of genocide in Ukraine or in Donetsk and so on and so forth. And it's interesting talking to people who know much more about these things than I do, and some of them are saying, in some ways, that's convincing the West, but we were already convinced. But it's actually convincing a lot of Russians that Americans are indulging in the same sort of lies and fabrications.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's not really helping the case in Russia, because, of course, what a lot of the intelligence services really want to see is Russians turning on Putin, but there is absolutely no sign of that happening.
And isn't the real hero in this new German Chancellor, the really short guy who looks like
Scholz.
Who looks like a bald hobbit?
He has been a hero this week.
He has done
hero
brilliantly. You have to look
but he
to
was
see
an appeaser
him.
to begin with. But he's done the right thing.
Come on, he's done an incredible thing. He's actually put his money where his mouth is.
But again, I say, Daisy, would he have done it without the moral leadership of Boris Johnson?
That's
He was
Daisy.
looking at you,
Amanda.
Daisy, would he have done it without the moral leadership of Boris Johnson? That's the point.
Yeah,
Germany followed us.
Well, no. I mean, what the Germans have done with the Nord gas line is much, much more than we've put sanctions on 3 people who are persona non grata in this country. Anyway, it's made no difference.
But what I'm saying is, even just a couple of weeks ago, Adam, Scholz wouldn't even talk about Nord Stream. He wouldn't even contemplate halting it.
Yeah.
So I think what Boris and Truss did is lead Europe, and they said this pathetic response from that pathetic small little Macron, who is the modern-day Neville Chamberlain, was not good enough. He is an appeaser. He looks like a fool because he promised the French people de-escalation, and that hasn't happened. And I think Boris has been proven to be right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Boris is coming out all right in this.
See, I don't agree on this. I actually think it's that Scholz guy, the Hobbit guy, that's done the really big thing. Because it's going to cost him, it's going to cost Putin a lot, because it's going to really affect but it's going to cost his own people. And we're talking about all these small men, Putin, Macron, this Scholz guy, I keep thinking he's a football manager.
But Scholz came under huge pressure from the Americans, and were also given...
And it was the right thing to do.
But he did it. And never underestimate, as they said in Lord of the Rings, what Gandalf said, even the smallest person can change the world.
You're obsessed with Iron.
But Amanda, your heartthrob Putin is 5.5.
OK, he's off my wall. Can I just say, after last week, I have...
You have to give up on that little fantasy, Amanda Platel. Adam Brooks, Stacey McCann, my superstar panel, who are here all night. But still to come on a similar theme, as a Russian invasion of Ukraine becomes increasingly likely, should the TV channel Russia Today be taken off air for spreading Putin's propaganda? Freedom-fighting Tory David Davis goes head-to-head with former Sunday Mirror editor Paul Connew. That's in the clash at 9:30. But I want to know what you think. Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. We've got our poll running there right now. But next, as Canadian riot police violently crack down on the Freedom Convoy's peaceful protesters, have faux liberals like Trudeau and his liberty-loathing supporters exposed their contempt for the working class? Broadcaster and Together Declaration Secretary Tonya Buxton investigates straight after the break.
Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your weather forecast. Over the next 24 hours, we've got snow and lightning across Scotland. That's going to be the main feature of our weather. And for all of us, it is going to be turning a lot colder. This cold front is sinking its way southwards across the UK, bringing much colder air. And where we've got this occluded front, that's where we're going to see some frequent and heavy showers with the risk of lightning. So let's take a look at the picture through Wednesday evening. Got some heavy rain on the cold front as it sinks its way through England and Wales. Some lively bursts of rain to come for a time. The colder air is coming in behind, so it's across Scotland and Northern Ireland where the weather warning is in place that we'll see frequent snow showers. We could see as much as 10 to 20 centimetres building up over the hills and mountains of Scotland. Temperatures sub-zero and feeling a lot colder in that wind. And they'll continue through much of the day. Those frequent showers pushing their way in as the rain clears away from southeastern areas. Elsewhere then, brightening up through the day, but further showers will push their way through. There'll be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and snow across the country. But as I say, the most frequent snow showers likely to be across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brisk winds as well means blizzards across those mountains, so some tricky conditions here. Temperatures a lot lower than recent days, and it stays cold and wintry through the first part of Thursday night. We'll see this another feature coming southwards, so we could see some snow over the Pennines, perhaps North Wales. But later on into the small hours of Friday, we'll start to see those winds easing down. The skies will clear, showers will tend to become fewer and further between. So a touch of frost first thing on Friday morning. Lots of sunshine out there, though, on Friday morning. Still a few showers in the mix, but they'll be easing their way off into the North Sea. And for most of us, under a ridge of high pressure through Friday, it looks to be a much calmer day. Light winds, temperatures not faring too bad, still on the chilly side. But I think as we go through the day, there'll be plenty of sunshine. And it stays dry across the south. Chance of rain further north over the weekend. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Lord Frost and Rod Liddle on the way, but Tonya Buxton is tonight's outsider. Justin Trudeau has spent the past month using poisonous politics and totalitarian tactics to try and silence the peaceful demonstrators in the Freedom Convoy. So it might surprise you to hear the man ruling over a tin-pot COVID dictatorship make this rebuke of Vladimir Putin last night.
I think as we see a rise of authoritarianism around the world, as we see challenges increasingly to democracies, to democratic principles, we need to all stand strong in defense of those values and principles.
Oh, the irony. Trudeau's brutal and violent crackdown on the liberty-loving truckers who were simply exercising their democratic right to fight for bodily autonomy have been positively Putin-esque. Police have been visiting the homes of people who support the truckers to intimidate them. They've threatened to shut businesses for simply serving them coffee. And Canadian banks have been freezing the accounts and cancelling credit cards of people linked to the trucker protesters, all using the draconian powers of Trudeau's Emergencies Act. But in Trudeau's latest shame, after weeks of suffering dishonest demonisation by their Prime Minister, the demonstrators were viciously kicked, hit and pepper-sprayed by heavily armed riot police on horseback. Several disturbing videos have shown peaceful protesters being beaten into submission, and Trudeau's merciless cops were caught trampling an elderly woman who appeared to be using a mobility scooter. It's no wonder that Quebec's riot police removed any identification from their uniforms after shameful scenes like this.
Stop! Hey, do not shut him! Hey, hey! Back! This is peace, love, and happiness! Peace! We are on peaceful protest! Hey, stand down! Oh my gosh! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Look what you did! Look what you did to her! Union! Drop the board! Good job, guys! They're coming in, guys. They're coming in. Grab her. Grab her, guys.
Don't squat it, all right? No stop, all right?
What a disgrace. Parliament Hill, where the protesters were gathered, has since been cleared and at least 196 people were arrested as of Monday. Ottawa's interim police chief, Steve Bell, has warned that they will continue to track down protesters so they can be fined and criminally charged. Well, Tonya Buxton, have faux liberals like Trudeau and those who support his war on the Freedom Convoy exposed their contempt for blue-collar folk, and I think actually too betrayed their anti-establishment roots?
It's a horror what's happening in Canada. It's an absolute horror that common working people, decent people who just want to fight for their own bodily autonomy are being treated in this way. They're being treated as though they're terrorists. But this is their home, this is their lives, this is their bodies that they're trying to have some autonomy over. And yet he is behaving like that. And yet he then goes out and talks about having democracy and behaving in a liberal way when he's doing exactly that. But you know what's the most horrifying about all of this, Dan, is the complete blanket silence of the mainstream media. This channel is the only television channel that's showing this and showing Trudeau for what he is. I was speaking to people on the street and I've been asking people all day today, and I have been for the past few days, isn't it terrible what's going on in Canada? And people look at me strange and say, why, what's going on in Canada? We're being force-fed whatever's going on in the Ukraine and Russia. But Canada is part of NATO. It's part of a state membership that we are members of. We should be speaking up. In democracies, we should be speaking up against the way that he is treating his people. He is behaving like a despotic fascist, and he's getting away with it because no one's stopping him, and it's shameful. And my heart goes out to all the Canadians. It goes out to the Canadian people. It goes out to the peaceful truckers who are just making a stance for themselves and their families.
And Tonya, I've been looking at this very closely, and I've also been looking very closely at a similar freedom convoy inspired by the Canadian truckers in Jacinda Ardern's New Zealand. And Trudeau and Ardern, they are following exactly the same playbook, Tonya. What they're trying to do is unfairly demonise these protesters as neo-Nazi, right-wing white supremacists. That is a lie, number one. And then the second thing that's going on, and this is very disturbing, people are infiltrating these protests to do violent acts, and then the leaders are using those small number of violent acts to demonise the entire protest. It's the complete opposite, by the way, Tonya, of what these exact same leaders did during the Black Lives Matter movement.
Absolutely. What they are doing is horrific, and the world must watch them and the world must speak up. And the worst thing that they're doing is that if you want to support these people, like if I was in Canada at the moment, I would be sending them money. I would be going, driving there and taking them coffees and lunches and looking after their children and helping as much as I can, because they're fighting for body autonomy and freedom. They're not fighting to blow someone up. They're not fighting for hate. They are a peaceful, kind people who just want to be heard by the people that are supposed to be listening to them. Trudeau is supposed to be listening and serving his people, and he's not. He's abusing them. And anybody that wants to help these people is also being abused. We've heard cases of single mothers who, way back when, sent $50 to the truckers, having their accounts frozen. We're hearing things about truckers who are being arrested, having their pets killed. I mean, this is barbaric and it's insanity. And I want to hear the leaders of the free world standing up against him. Why are they not speaking up? Why is Boris not saying anything?
Well, we're not hearing anything, are we? We're not hearing anything apart from a few brave Tory backbenchers at this stage. One of them, Marcus Fish, who was on this show talking about it last week, and I absolutely commend him for speaking up. But no, we're not hearing it from any of the leaders. I think there's a complete Oh, sorry, you go, Tonya.
There, for the grace of people, like the Together Declaration, go us. Go we. Thank goodness us in Britain, we've got some amazing Tory backbenchers. They're the ones that are fighting for us. We've come together as people like people that are doing the Together Declaration, which I'm part of, standing up for our rights, standing up for our freedoms, and checking the people that we elected to govern us. And that's what's going on in Canada at the moment. And I despair for the people going on there. Why is no one speaking up? What he's doing is fascism. It's despotic. It should be illegal. He should be going to prison now for crimes against humanity. And yet he's not. He's standing there talking against Putin, which, and he, in my eyes, is far worse because he is turning guns and equipment and police on his own people. How is he getting away with this?
Remember, these are people, on the whole, who have lost their jobs for choosing not to have a medical procedure. That is what it comes down to. But, Tonya, I think it's the work of people like you and the Together Declaration that have actually stopped this situation coming to the UK, and that's incredibly important. And that's the reason why we were fighting so hard for our civil liberties over the past year. Sometimes people would say, Tonya, wouldn't they? Oh, why do you care if you have to put a mask on? Why do you care if you have to stay home for a while? And I'll tell you why. Because it leads to what is going on right now in Canada and right now in New Zealand. And thank God we have avoided this in the UK. And let me tell you, if Keir Starmer was the Prime Minister right now, we would be in exactly the same situation. Tonya Buxton, thank you so much for being here tonight. Coming up, as promising news about the Queen's health emerges from Buckingham Palace, our future Queen, Kate, is winning the hearts of the world in Denmark. So could she be about to prove that she's the royal family's saving grace? Royal biographer Robert Jobson gives his verdict live from Copenhagen shortly. But up next, as Nadine Dorries orders an Ofcom review, should TV channel Russia Today be taken off air for spreading propaganda? Tory grandee David Davis goes head-to-head with former Sunday Mirror editor Paul Connew in the clash. And as always, your opinion matters most to me. So let me know what you think. Dan at gbnews.uk on the email. Tweet me using the handle at GBNews. We've got our poll running there right now. I had a little check of it a couple of minutes ago. It's close, so your vote matters tonight. I'll reveal the results after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Lord Frost and Rod Liddle on the way, but now it's time for the clash. While we've been calling Putin out in recent weeks for his blatant disregard for international law, the former KGB officer's state-funded news channel Russia Today has been spewing out his usual propaganda.
Why do you think the West is drumming up fears here of a Russian invasion when Russia has said, look, consistently we have said we will not attack and we want a diplomatic solution?
There are no Russian troop movements towards Ukraine. There are significant troop movements in the opposite direction.
Immediately following Putin's announcement, celebrations were underway in the Donbas region, as you see there on the right side of your screen. On the left, that's Kiev, and it was oddly quiet, probably waiting on orders from the United States on what to do next. Well, what the United States is doing, though, is what it does every time a country does something it doesn't like: sanctions.
With Russian troops having officially entered Ukraine, the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries today wrote to the broadcasting regulator Ofcom to ask them to review the Kremlin-backed RT operations, which she said was demonstratedly part of Russia's global disinformation campaign. Ofcom's chief executive, Dame Melanie Dawes, responded saying that the regulator had already stepped up its oversight of coverage of these events by broadcasters in the UK. Meanwhile, during PMQs, the Prime Minister hit out at the SNP's Ian Blackford for his criticism of the government's sanctions, despite the fact his party's former leader, Alex Salmond, hosts his own show on Russia Today.
I think his indignation is, I'm afraid, a bit much coming from somebody whose very own Alex Salmond is a leading presenter on, as far as I know, on Russia Today, which the leader of the opposition has just called on this country to ban.
Getting excited. Oh, the hypocrisy. But while you know I'm very much against Putin's actions, I'm also very much against state censorship of the media. I think the British people are intelligent enough to cope with watching a Russian propaganda TV station to see Putin's angle. It's actually quite chilling if we see Ofcom taking down entire TV stations. But what do you think? Am I wrong? I know this is a hotly contested vote. Should Russia Today be taken off air for spreading propaganda? Send me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews and vote in our poll there too. I'll bring you the results in a moment. But debating this now to help you make up your mind, I'm joined by former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew, and the former Conservative Minister, David Davis. So, David, look, I understand what Russia Today is, but we know what it is. We don't really need to pull it off air, do we?
No, we don't. I mean, in as much as Ofcom don't do anything, they probably should tell them they have to label where their footage comes from. So you were showing something earlier which was plainly from the Russian Ministry of Defence. And you should have that label on it, you know. Look, we've got, our public are pretty smart. They're pretty sophisticated. They'll look at this and say, well, that's what the Russians think. It may even give them an insight into literally how the Russians think. I mean, bear in mind, quite a large proportion of the Russian public think that Stalin was a great man, even today, the older ones. So, you know, knowing that is helpful, knowing the perception we're dealing with, because the public are also making a judgment about our own government's behaviour, and they want to make a decision. Is it working? Is it working on the Russians? What the Russian perception is? So I don't like the idea, like you, I don't like the idea of having a state censor. After all, that's what this argument's about at the end of the day. What's this battle about? It's about preserving freedom and democracy for the Ukraine, you know? And in preserving freedom and democracy, we throw away our own freedom of speech, our own freedom to see what we want. No, it doesn't work for me. I think, you know, by all means, tell them they've got to label things properly. Otherwise, let the British public decide. They're smarter than most people think.
Paul Connew, ironically, as a lefty, you're with Nadine Dorries on this.
Not exactly. I mean, I'm hardly the chairman of the Nadine Dorries fan club.
Oh, I know.
Seeing her screaming and shouting there behind Boris Johnson's side at PMQs, I thought was a bit a bit rich. No, like David, I'm a huge believer in press freedom and freedom of speech. I've got very mixed feelings on this. And I certainly don't think politicians should be closing down a TV station, even RT. But I do think that Ofcom have to look at this closely on a case-by-case basis. And I think if it continues with false news being peddled out and pure propaganda, then I think there could be a case for it. But as I say, it should be Ofcom. It should be Nadine Dorries or Boris Johnson, although I think Boris Johnson's instinct probably wouldn't be to do it. So I think it has to be studied on a daily, almost an hourly basis. And where there is blatant, and it's frequently blatant propaganda, state control propaganda, then I think there could be a case for taking it off air or suspending it at times and fining it heavily. But I don't think we can simply let it ride and say, well, it's freedom of speech. Of course, people, there is the risk, of course, that the BBC gets taken down, well, itself gets taken down in Russia in retaliation if we do it. But at some stage, it may have to come to that. But I do feel very, very uneasy about it, I must confess.
But David Davis, the problem is that's not how the Ofcom process works, is it? They rely on public complaints about individual broadcasts, and then there's actually quite a long process. So what Nadine Dorries seemed to be calling for today was almost like warlike action from Ofcom, and Ofcom have rebuffed her, as far as I could see, even though they tried to give her some assurances.
Yeah, well, you're right. The mechanism is not one, I mean, quite deliberately not one to design to allow state censorship. It's designed to respond to public complaints, So I don't think they could have done, even under their charter, what Nadine, or at least the Prime Minister, was implying. I mean, may I pick up something Paul said? You see,
of course.
It's not just about whether the Russians switch off or somehow prevent BBC World Service. That sometime in the future somebody else might do that as well, and they'll turn around and say, "Look what happened with Russia today," and so we've got to be very careful in those terms. I don't think Paul really believes his own readers are taken in by this nonsense. Many of them will be quite amused, I think. I mean, in the Second World War, our soldiers used to laugh at what was broadcast from Germany, and it was part of their daily humour. And I think the same will happen here. But it's also we have a principle to defend. We stand for a certain sort of society. We start getting oversensitive about this. I mean, bear in mind how many people actually watch Russia Today?
Very few.
Tiny numbers anyway. And they're either they're Russian supporters anyway, or they're probably doing it for humour. So I don't really think it's going to have much of an impact.
Dan, David and I are old enough to think back. I'm no IRA supporter, but I can think back to when Jerry Adams, for example, we had to hear his voice replaced by an actor. In fact, which I thought, even though I could not support the IRA in any way, I thought was absurd back then.
Yeah. Well, we agree. I think it was daft.
So I think we have to be very, very careful on this one. But I think Nadine Dorries, I have to admit, I think her motivation was driven more by trying to divert attention from the pathetic, puny sanctions Boris Johnson has introduced so far. I thought the Times leader this morning excoriating our efforts compared to most of Europe and the US, not least Germany, was actually bang on the money. And I think
David, where do you stand? Do you think Boris has gone far enough on the sanctions?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't quite agree with Paul's language on it, but I think the whole of the House of Commons, frankly, wanted to see more. They want to see more. I mean, we looked at three. I mean, look, what was going on was Boris and the government were trying to create a staged process. But the risk of what they did was, one, the Russians would not take us seriously, and that's not a risk. That's actually an outcome. They haven't. Right. Secondly, that we are one of the greater nations in the Western Alliance. We weren't giving robust leadership in what we did. It was too mild-mannered. Thirdly, it was based on a misanalysis. I mean, if you're going to pick on Russian banks, pick on the biggest ones, not the one that happens to hold the account of the defence ministry. Pick on the biggest ones. But I think we're going to have to step that up enormously. I mean,
and not to mention,
target,
David, three oligarchs who have been on the sanctions list in the US since 2014.
Sorry, I missed that, Paul. Sorry.
So, not to mention, the only three oligarchs are a trio who've been on the American sanction list since 2014.
Yeah. We're not fundamentally disagreeing. I mean,
no, but also this was just the start. I mean, David, do you not understand the argument, which is you want to be able to ratchet this up over many days as Putin continues his outrageous behaviour?
Yeah, well, I don't think it works. I mean, the first thing is that implies there's some small ration of things you can do, right? As I said, I mean, Navalny, the Russian opposition leader, I think was in prison in Russia at the moment,
he is.
Identified 35. Then there were another 100 odd. As well as that. So you're talking nearly 150 potential targets. You could take them in 50s if you wanted to. But that's not the end of it. You've also got issues like supply of silicon chips and other critical supplies to the Russian to the Russian economy and indeed to the Russian military. Those things you could cut off as well. There are a whole series of measures you can undertake. And the risk of doing it this way is the first step is seen by the Russians as feeble. And that's very dangerous.
David, just final question to you. Obviously, before this outbreak of likely war, you called on Boris Johnson to resign. We're now in a potentially perilous position for the international community. Boris Johnson is providing a lot of important moral leadership. Have you changed your mind because of this crisis, and do you think it's important that Boris stays in the job?
Well, I think what's happened is it's gone on suspend, basically. I think this issue will come back. Let's see what happens with the Russians. If the Russians continue to invade the rest of the Ukraine, then we're going to have a very serious, long-running problem. If they stop where they are now, and it comes back, this international situation comes back under some sort of control, then interest will return to domestic politics, and it'll be the Sue Gray report and the police reports and the national insurance increase and the May elections and so on, and it'll return back to then. I think we'll return to the argument then. But you're right, today's not the day to debate that.
No. Former Tory Minister David Davis and former Sunday Mirror editor Paul Connew, thank you both so much. So who do you agree with? Sean on Twitter says, we blame oppressive regimes for suppression of the media. How then can we do the same just because we disagree with their view? Faye via Twitter, there's no point. Most people are not influenced by Russia today. It would be PR for Putin because it will be seen as the West banning media. But Amelia via email says no contest, shut down anything Russian. And your verdict now, and I told you this was a close one, 52% of you agree that RT should be taken off air. 48% of you say that censorship of RT isn't right. So hotly contested clash tonight. Thank you so much for all of your feedback. Coming up, as Heathrow suffers its lowest passenger numbers in 50 years, is it time to end testing and other travel restrictions on the unvaccinated? My superstar panel will debate that and more in the Media Buzz. Plus, you'll get a first look at tomorrow's front pages, so make sure you don't miss that at 10. But next, as promised, news about the Queen's health emerges from Buckingham Palace tonight. Is our future Queen, Kate, proving to be the saviour of the royal family? Legendary royal biographer Robert Jobson beams in from Copenhagen, where he's been on the road with Kate straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Lord Frost coming up as the lockdown inquiry continues, but it's time now for Crown Jewels with Robert Jobson. And breaking tonight, the world can breathe a little collective sigh of relief at encouraging news regarding the Queen's health. Her Majesty was well enough to hold her weekly audience with the Prime Minister this afternoon after testing positive for COVID at the weekend, which resulted in her having to cancel virtual engagements yesterday. Our beloved Queen, who the palace says is suffering mild cold-like symptoms, continues to recuperate. But a future Queen is winning hearts internationally. The Duchess of Cambridge has wrapped up a mission to Denmark, learning how the country approaches young children's mental health and well-being. She also met Crown Princess Mary and Queen Margrethe II of Denmark, who, like our own monarch, is celebrating a jubilee this year, although it's gold rather than platinum. Well, royal editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Jobson, was with Kate on her visit. Jobbo, we'll talk about Kate having a real moment very shortly. But first, of course, the most important news, the Queen on the phone today with the Prime Minister. That has to be a positive sign, especially seeing, as usual, there's lots of vile and nasty internet conspiracy theories doing the round about her health.
Well, I've always been pretty confident, actually, Dan, that she's in reasonable shape.
Great.
There's a couple of things I know from behind the scenes that wouldn't have happened if she had been in a bad way. So I'm not going to say what they were, but I was pretty confident enough to come to Copenhagen and Denmark and cover this trip. I wouldn't have done that had I not been confident that she was in reasonable space.
Good
the
news.
Queen, and so the Queen, yes, she had the conversation with the Prime Minister today. She's we know she's a great age at 95, but she's just doing enough to keep her busy, to keep her to do light duties, and she's not overdoing it, which is the other thing that's quite important.
And she shouldn't, and we've both warned her against that, so that's very good news. Jobbo, what a couple of days it's been for Kate, though.
Oh, she's been terrific form. Actually, this was a solo engagement. She doesn't normally do solo engagements abroad. I think there's only been one other before this, and she did very, very well. I mean, the point of it is I thought she was very relaxed the whole time she was here in Copenhagen, and she performed the duties, official duties for the Queen, along with Crown Princess Mary, who's a wonderful lady, and they were both doing those engagements. A lot of it's to do, though, with early learning for youngsters, for young kids, and her work that she's been doing with the foundation about that, which is important stuff. It's all about, quite sensible stuff about young kids having more outdoor time, not just focusing on academic work, in the preschool age and things like that. And but she was also there with the Queen and Mary at the palace, as we can see, representing our Queen in passing on her congratulations in the Queen Margrethe's Golden Jubilee year. I mean, I think and today she was also down at this forest kindergarten where she was chopping wood and messing around with the kids. And as she emerged today from the school, they were like the Pied Piper, all these little cuties. They were like the central casting for cuteness, these kids, with their little outfits just following on behind her. So, no, she's done a terrific job, and she's been, I think, less cautious than she perhaps is when she's with Prince William at a side, as we saw her when she went down that slide and emerged out the other side the other day as well.
Jobbo, actually, and it amazes me how Kate has grown in confidence over the past few years because she's actually painfully shy.
Well, she was. I mean, there's no doubt about that. When she was speaking, she was quite nervous. And, you know, this was a girl from the home counties that met William at university and then before long was thrust into the public eye. But over the last 10 years, she's certainly grown in stature. She's certainly been able to deal with the public attention and the press attention. That took some time. Speaking publicly, she's much better than she was before, and very confident, and picks her issues and her subjects she wants to talk about. And I think really she's grown in stature, and there's no question she's a great asset to the royal family. And I think that with the Queen, you know, in her coming up to 96, having to do this, I think, you know, we're going to see much more of Kate doing solo engagements. She'll be there at the rugby at the weekend, I think, with William wearing his red, and she'll be wearing the red rose of England and the white.
We need her at the moment.
So that'll be fun.
We need her.
I think that she's really grown, and actually, I thought on this trip, she was in terrific form, and she was really relaxed and showed what an asset she is.
Robert Jobson on tour with Kate in Copenhagen. Thank you so much, Jobbo. We'll speak next week.
Pleasure.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton, and tonight I'm continuing my mission to hold the scientific and political establishment accountable for the mistakes and injustices of the country's pandemic response with my lockdown inquiry. And next up, to give evidence, one of Boris Johnson's most trusted allies who rocked Downing Street with his shock resignation over hardline COVID policies. Former Brexit Minister Lord David Frost is here with valuable insight into the decision-making in Westminster and the obsession with Plan B. Plus, I'll ask why on earth he was forced to sacrifice himself to save us from a needless Omicron lockdown. That plus his response to the Ukraine crisis coming up from 10:20. We'll also bring you tomorrow's front pages hot off the press. How has Fleet Street responded to the escalating situation in Europe? We'll find out next and throughout this final hour. Unabashed lefty Emily Maitlis has finally stepped down from the BBC. But should she have been pushed years ago? Rod Liddle thinks so, and it's no surprise after he came under attack in one of her most egregious and damaging examples of biased broadcasting.
Bile that you spew up has to be who you are. This kind of stuff.
The columnist extraordinaire will give his verdict as he returns to Uncancelled at 10:20. As Heathrow suffers its lowest passenger numbers in 50 years, is it time to end testing and other travel restrictions on the unvaccinated? Plus, does Mrs. Brown's Boy star Brendan O'Carroll deserve to be cancelled for making this joke?
Where we haven't had anybody his colour in there, so I don't know if we could have him in, but you know what?
I'll get the verdicts of my superstar panel, Amanda Platal, Adam Brooks and Daisy McAndrew, in the Media Buzz next and at 10:30. Plus, I'll crown today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass from my panel's nomination before the show is out, so do stay with us this hour. But first, the news headlines at 10 with Tamsin Roberts.
Dan, thank you. Good evening from the GB Newsroom. A 30-day state of emergency has been declared in Ukraine, with the US warning Russia is ready to attack. Ukrainian troops are reinforcing the border with new American intelligence showing Russia's forces are in forward positions, suggesting an invasion is imminent. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says that leaders of two separatist regions in eastern Ukraine have asked for help dealing with aggression from the Ukrainian army. Russia's refusal to back down has led to further sanctions, the US targeting the company behind Nord Stream 2 and its corporate officers. Speaking at the United Nations in New York, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba urged the West to hit more and hit hard.
Ukraine has never planned and does not plan any military offensive in the Donbas. Neither any provocations or acts of sabotage, as Russia attacked the very fundamental principles of international peace and security.
EU leaders are due to hold an emergency summit on the crisis tomorrow. Meanwhile, here in the UK, the Prime Minister has announced further military support for Ukraine.
I can announce to the House that in light of the increasingly threatening behaviour from Russia and in line with our previous support, the UK will shortly be providing a further package of military support to Ukraine. Yeah. This will include lethal aid in the form of defensive weapons and non-lethal aid.
To other news now. A rapist who carried his victim through Leeds before attacking her has been given a life sentence. Austin Asandi was captured on CCTV walking through deserted streets with the woman in his arms in August 2015. He was only caught last September after assaulting another woman whilst working as a delivery driver. He's been jailed for life with a minimum term of 16 years. The UK is facing more bad weather with strong winds and heavy snow set to hit the UK this week. It comes after 3 storms battered the UK over recent days. 2 severe flood warnings are still in place for the River Severn, which has now peaked. Prince Harry has launched a High Court libel action against the publisher of the Daily Mail. Court papers show a claim has been made against Associated Newspapers, but it's not clear which title it's linked to. The Duke of Sussex is also currently bringing privacy claims against the publishers of The Sun and The Mirror. His wife Meghan previously won a case against Associated Newspapers after it reproduced parts of a letter to her estranged father, Thomas Markle. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now, let's get straight back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. And let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages hot off the press. And the Metro's headline, Putin's gone full Tonto. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has claimed Vladimir Putin could be taught a lesson by British troops. Ukraine has declared a state of emergency and there are fears of a full-scale invasion. On the front of The Independent, UK ministers have been told by the government's climate advisers that they must end all new oil and gas exploration. Oh yeah, great timing, guys, great timing. And as the Ukraine-Russia crisis continues, the UN have declared the world faces a moment of peril. A moment of peril, by the way, which is absolutely why the UK must continue oil and gas exploration so that we're not reliant on Russia. They just don't get it, do they? My superstar panel are back with me. They certainly get it. The Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, the publican and social media sensation Adam Brooks, and the political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. Now, breaking tonight, Heathrow Airport has seen passenger numbers plummet to their lowest levels in 50 years as the travel industry remains in a critical condition as a result of COVID regulations. Amid a weaker than expected January and February, with only a quarter of the predicted number of travellers checking in, the Transport Hub's boss John Holland has warned footfall might not return to pre-pandemic levels as late as 2026. Passenger numbers fell to 19.4 million in 2021 compared to the 80 million the airport previously handled per year. News of EU nations agreeing to let fully vaccinated travellers in without the need for tests will hopefully provide a small boost in time for Easter holidays. But if we truly want to return the industry to full health, we need everyone on an even playing field, including the unvaccinated. Only a handful of countries, such as Cyprus, Turkey and Croatia, allow unvaccinated travellers, but the rigmarole of having to test and fill out a passenger locator form, still requirements of entering the UK without a jab, actually you've still got to do a form even if you have been jabbed, or potentially quarantining, risks putting flyers off. And the unvaccinated aren't only treated differently when it comes to travel. New research has confirmed what many of us have suspected. The vaccinate discriminate against the jabless. The study of more than 10,000 people from 21 countries conducted by a university in Denmark has revealed those with a jab maintain stereotypic references that unvaccinated individuals are untrustworthy and unintelligent, making the antipathy resemble prejudice towards other deviant groups. However, there was no such ill will towards the vaccinated from those who haven't been jabbed, exposing self-proclaimed COVID moralists as some of the least tolerant people in society. Now, Adam Brooks, you say you've had people holding prejudiced views against you because of your COVID activism.
Look, I suppose I'm one of the leading voices against vaccine passports, but people like to guess my vaccine status. I won't declare it. My family know my status, and it's my business. But I'm an anti-vaxxer to many people online because I simply want everyone to be treated the same.
I mean, Daisy, why is it fair to treat unvaccinated people any differently than vaccinated people, especially when the science no longer backs up these policies? Because if you've got Omicron, it doesn't matter. If you're vaccinated or you're unvaccinated, you're going to spread it just as much.
Well, that's not what all scientists would say. As you know, you can find scientists who will say that, and you will find scientists who won't say that, who will say it's better to be vaccinated. But I agree with you that it's very, very dangerous for one section of the vaccinated community or unvaccinated community to hold these views. And I've seen it personally many times, both within my own friendship group and wider. And I think there are real dangers here because particularly when you look at some of the areas that don't get discussed very much, one of the main one being that the representation of BAME community amongst the unvaccinated is very high. And with these sorts of attitudes where people are saying these people are ignorant, these people are selfish, these people are stupid, then that can very quickly go into racism.
Amanda Patel, why on earth would you want to treat any group of people in society differently? It's just segregation and discrimination, pure and simple.
Well, I don't agree with the top premise of this, that people like me who think everyone should be vaccinated think that people who don't are stupid. I respect their views. I think it's up to their individual choice. I just think if you have made a decision not to be vaccinated, then you should enjoy the privacy of your own home and your own backyard and your own bubble, and you should not be coming out being in a position where you're going to infect people like me. I would not get on a plane.
Where's the evidence?
I would not get... come on, Dan. We know the evidence is not rock
not
solid
for Omicron.
anywhere. It's not rock solid anywhere.
How many triple vaccinated people do you know have had Omicron? Virtually every triple vaccinated person I know has had Omicron.
I can top this. Okay. Right. In Israel, I said this on the show the other week. In Israel, there's people that are quadruple vaccinated and they are still getting Omicron and they're still passing on Omicron. So let's say I was unvaccinated. I'm of no more danger to you than someone that's had 3 or 4 vaccines.
I just don't believe that. I just don't believe it. I mean, there's so many universities, there's so many colleges, there's so much information out there. We all have to, at the end of the day, I respect your view. I just don't want you on a plane near me, OK?
That's just ridiculous.
And I do actually...
But that is segregation and discrimination.
No,
Amanda would have 10 vaccines
it's free choice.
if she could, yeah.
It's free choice.
No, it's not.
It's free choice.
Because you're trying to stop the unvaccinated from travelling next to you.
Yeah, I so
But
would.
Amanda, presumably you would be happy to sit next to somebody who is unvaccinated but had done a lateral flow or a PCR to show that they're not carrying it.
Yeah, on the day.
Yeah, but you don't know if I'm vaccinated or not.
I don't.
I could be...
We're not having him next week.
You might want to rush out the door.
It is him or me
But
next
Amanda,
week.
the thing is, I actually feel sorry for you for having this view because I think you've got that whole COVID anxiety syndrome
I don't have
going
COVID
on.
anxiety.
Honestly,
no, it's become like a religion, Dan.
because if you look, because if you,
it is so not a religion.
It is like a religion.
Look,
like you are worshipping the jab. You'd have 10 if you could. You know?
Kind of insult to someone who is a practicing Christian to say it's a religion. First off,
right.
Secondly, it is a point of view, and I'm entitled to.
But of course you're entitled. Of course you're entitled to your point of view.
Yours.
But can I just ask you,
most of the
Amanda?
evidence, I believe, is that if you are unvaccinated, you're more likely to catch it and pass it on to other people.
Not with Omicron.
Not with the Omicron. It's changed. And Amanda, do you not understand? I just think what's been so bad about all of the hysteria around COVID and vaccines
I'm not hysterical.
is that you have lost the point about why you have a vaccine. You have a vaccine to protect yourself. And the vaccine does not stop transmission.
No.
It simply doesn't. And I've had scientists like Carl Hennigan on talking about that.
Dan, do not tell me, with all due respect, what I do. I take a vaccination to protect myself and because I believe that protects the other people who are around me.
It doesn't.
But also, Dan,
the science shows it doesn't.
Dan, you and Adam keep saying, but not Omicron, not Omicron. But Omicron is not the end of the story. Now, it might well be that the next variant or mutation is even milder. It might well be that it's not. And pretty much every scientist agrees with that. So it is a bit silly to say vaccines have had their day because we have a variant that is
I'm not saying
mild.
that. I'm pro-vaccination, but I'm absolutely pro-personal choice. And I think the most destructive thing about your attitude, Amanda, is actually what it ends up doing is discouraging the sceptical from having vaccines. Because what you are doing and what attitudes like yours, Trudeau, Ardern's are doing is you're actually pushing these people out of society. And look at what happens.
No, I'm not saying that. I just think they should get their own planes.
But that's impractical, Amanda, and ridiculous.
Can we talk about why
and the
people
other
like
thing that really upsets me about this is I think that we have a civic duty, because you look at the number of people who are seriously in intensive care in hospitals, most of them have not been vaccinated.
No, that's
and why should the
that's
NHS...
also not true.
It's also not true.
It is true.
It's not. I've had Jamie Jenkins on, who was the former head stats guy at ONS.
It's not true. But can I just say...
I feel like I'm being gangbanged by stats.
There's a reason why people like Amanda have these views. And it's government nudges.
What is that,
Adam? It's ministers being so divisive with their speeches and attacking unvaccinated. And also, you know, it's articles like Andrew Neil's article on the unvaccinated, Carol Malone's article on that as well, and Polly Hudson. Now, if you attack a group of people, you're going to get their backs up. And you can't shame people into having vaccines. It's not going to happen.
But OK, Adam, I don't want to talk about your own vaccine status, but would you agree that it is preferable for a country to have over 85% vaccinated?
Again, it's free choice.
No, I'm saying scientifically.
Top question, Daisy.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And we're there.
I haven't finished. So, if that is the case, how do we get the final 20%?
You're not going to get the final.
No, and we don't need to.
And we don't
That's the whole
need I'm sorry, we actually don't, because 98% of English adults have COVID antibodies, and even Bill Gates now accepts that natural infection is better than the vaccine. Sadly, he says, but he does accept that Omicron is like a natural vaccine. Look, I've got to move on, though, because after Jimmy Carr and David Chappelle face cancellation for doing their day jobs, the latest in the firing line is Mrs. Brown's Boys creator Brendan O'Carroll. The Irish comedian was branded, quote, incredibly racist by Twitter warriors after making this joke about Meghan Markle's Hollywood pal Tyler Perry, his co-star, in an upcoming film on The One Show last night.
Brendan, are we likely to see Tyler's Medea appearing in Mrs. Brown's Boys at any point in the future?
I don't know if we could afford him. He's very expensive.
Please answer that. Please answer that. I want to hear that.
He's very expensive, and so far we haven't had anybody his colour in there. So I don't know if we could have him in. But you know what? I'd love that. But I think more importantly, I'd love to do another movie with him.
Nobody my colour.
Well,
Time to change the world. Change the world. Diversity rules. Here we go.
A big thank you to...
Now, Brendan has stayed silent in the face of the backlash, which saw his gab described as an extremely misplaced attempt at humour and offensive at best. And despite leaping to the defence of another of its best-loved stars, Graham Norton, earlier this month after he received complaints for referring to Ukraine as southwest Russia, the BBC washed their hands of this incident. Looks like they've only got room in their hearts for one Irish treasure. Just very quickly, Amanda, joke racist?
No, but I think it's really offensive that both of those blokes end up playing old women and making fun of them, and they should be on the naughty step. Tootsie and Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, don't worry, that will be banned
have
soon.
Both been put on the naughty step. I was going to be say blacklisted, but I cannot say that.
Adam,
I think it was ill-judged and a bit silly, but I think we might see a black character come out of this, you know, on the show. So maybe some good.
Daisy McAndrew?
Well, I think it's one of the unfunniest shows on TV, and I think he's trying. I think he's trying to be cancelled. I think he's trying to be cool. I think that was a deliberate attempt.
It's not
Look
funny.
At me.
I just think it's like,
cool
but you know what? I think it's completely fine for comedians to be unfunny we don't have to cancel them for an unfunny joke. But Daisy McAndrew, Adam Brooks, Amanda Patel, thank you so much.
Going all
I'll
over
be
the
back
place tonight.
very soon. But coming up, are the COVID hysterics responsible for stockpiling loo rolls and pasta back at it again? Find out as the media buzz continues at 10:30. But next, will Boris Johnson regret ignoring lockdown concerns of his most loyal allies in the Tory party? The PM's #1 Brexit star, Lord David Frost, quit in protest of hardline COVID policies and one of the biggest blows of his premiership. He'll give vital evidence to my lockdown inquiry on the battle for liberty that played out in the halls of Westminster. Don't miss it, straight after the break.
Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your weather forecast. Over the next 24 hours, we've got snow and lightning across Scotland. That's going to be the main feature of our weather. And for all of us, it is going to be turning a lot colder. This cold front is sinking its way southwards across the UK, bringing much colder air. And where we've got this occluded front, that's where we're going to see some frequent and heavy showers with the risk of lightning. So let's take a look at the picture through Wednesday evening. Got some heavy rain on the cold front as it sinks its way through England and Wales. Some lively bursts of rain to come for a time. The colder air is coming in behind, so it's across Scotland and Northern Ireland where the weather warning is in place that we'll see frequent snow showers. We could see as much as 10 to 20 centimetres building up over the hills and mountains of Scotland. Temperatures sub-zero and feeling a lot colder in that wind. And they'll continue through much of the day. Those frequent showers pushing their way in as the rain clears away from southeastern areas. Elsewhere then, brightening up through the day, but further showers will push their way through. There'll be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and snow across the country. But as I say, the most frequent snow showers likely to be across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brisk winds as well means blizzards across those mountains, so some tricky conditions here. Temperatures a lot lower than recent days, and it stays cold and wintry through the first part of Thursday night. We'll see this another feature coming southwards, so we could see some snow over the Pennines, perhaps North Wales. But later on into the small hours of Friday, we'll start to see those winds easing down. The skies will clear, showers will tend to become fewer and further between. So a touch of frost first thing on Friday morning. Lots of sunshine out there, though, on Friday morning. Still a few showers in the mix, but they'll be easing their way off into the North Sea. And for most of us, under a ridge of high pressure through Friday, it looks to be a much calmer day. Light winds, temperatures not faring too bad, still on the chilly side. But I think as we go through the day, there'll be plenty of sunshine. And it stays dry across the south. Chance of rain further north over the weekend. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I mean, I think it's really...
Former Brexit Minister Lord David Frost is next to give evidence in the lockdown inquiry. In the entire course of the pandemic, there was only one brave cabinet minister who stuck his head above the COVID parapet and put his morals about nonsensical lockdown policies ahead of career progression. Lord Frost, Boris Johnson's highly respected Brexit minister, who helped deliver a successful deal with the EU, stunned the PM when he quit the cabinet in December over the introduction of Plan B, what I've always called Plan BS. It was his bold stance, coupled with the mass Tory backbench rebellion, which saved the country from entering a completely unnecessary Omicron lockdown last Christmas, which was being pushed by the Cabinet's lockdown fanatics and SAGE's restriction-obsessed scientists, including Chris Whitty. And it's a pleasure to have him here tonight. So, Lord Frost, why did the government react so hysterically to Omicron when all of the evidence from South Africa actually made it very clear that this variant was far milder and could actually be, as has turned out to be the case, a good thing?
Yeah, great to be here, Dan. It's a very good question, and I ask myself that quite often. I don't know why. It's not at all clear. Even from the early days in mid-December, it was pretty clear that the Omicron variant was weaker. We knew that from South Africa. I was surprised by Chris Whitty's statement in December that everything we know about Omicron was bad, because that didn't seem to be justified by the evidence. And it looked like we were just on autopilot. Obviously, at that point, I already made clear I was leaving over Plan B and vaccine passports, which was the point of principle for me. But it looked like we were on autopilot down the slippery slope again to a lockdown, and I'm very glad if I played a small part in preventing that happen. That's great.
I think you played more than a small part, and we are very grateful for it, because I do have to admit, Lord Frost, it was one of my frustrations throughout this pandemic that there seemed to be so little pushback from the cabinet against the dodgy modelling, against the hysterical epidemiologists, and I need to understand why that was the case.
So, I mean, I don't want to give away secrets, and I shouldn't, but I think it's hardly a secret that the evidence at times was presented kind of late, in excessive detail, and that there never was much of an effort to kind of trade off the economic effects, the social effects against the health effects. And if you're a departmental minister who's doing a day job, and you're presented with this, then you've got to be very confident of your own judgment to say that all these experts have got it wrong, and I'm right. And I think that's why this went on for so long. I do think, to me, one of the most troubling things of this whole last 2 years is the fact that it took so long for us to come out of lockdown and from these measures. I don't find it so surprising that we initially went into it. But as the evidence changed and as it became clearer that COVID was not so dangerous, that the vaccines worked effectively, and so on, the reaction didn't seem to adjust to that. And I still find that quite surprising. But I think what I've just said is one of the reasons. People were looking elsewhere, they had other things, and you tend to defer to the experts unless you're 100% sure of your judgment.
Was there a psychological aspect, Lord Frost, with the Prime Minister himself nearly dying from COVID-19? Because, of course, Boris always presented himself as a great libertarian, but throughout 2020, he seemed to fundamentally change.
So I'm not sure. I don't really remember the PM being that different when he came back. Obviously, he was a little tired. That's understandable. But I don't really remember, a great difference in him. He was pretty ebullient, pretty keen to get on with things, and I think, his libertarian instincts were always there. I think, you take a lot of responsibility when you're Prime Minister. You have to make some really major judgments, and it's not that surprising that there's a pressure to err on the side of caution. So I don't think it was. I mean, it's always difficult to guess other people's psychological sort of development, but I don't think it was that. I think it was just simpler questions of policy making really that were the cause of this.
And it really feels like cabinet decision-making changed over the course of lockdown. You know, one of the great things about our Westminster system is that you have collective cabinet responsibility, but you should be able to go into that room and lock horns, knock heads together. But that wasn't happening during COVID because it was all done remotely. And tell me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like all of the decisions were made and cabinet became almost a rubber stamping process.
So I think, lots of the decisions had to be made really quickly. So that's always part of the process in these circumstances. I think remote meetings probably did have some effect. You don't have the kind of dynamics that developed, although by the time I was in the cabinet, it was getting back to normal. I do think in the end, cabinet ministers have got to take responsibility. You can't say that. I mean, some people said to me after I left, "Why did you go? COVID's not your job. You should focus on what is your job." But some things are bigger than that. COVID, our response to COVID was about how we govern this country overall. You can't say, if a question of war and peace appears, you can't say, well, that's for the Ministry of Defence, I don't take a view on it. Some things are just too big. And COVID was too big, and I think everyone had a responsibility to take a view. And in the end, there was a point of principle that I knew I'd never be able to support vaccine passports. I think they're the wrong thing. And when that decision was taken, I knew I could stay.
There's a couple of specific points I want to pick up with you about government policy to do with COVID. The first was this extraordinary propaganda campaign. I call it propaganda. I guess the government would call it public health information. But they spent literally tens or even hundreds of millions of pounds, actually, to terrify the population with really scary messages that weren't always backed up in science. You could argue when we didn't know about coronavirus, maybe in sort of March 2020, there could have been a justification for it. But this advertising continued for months and months and months. Did you have an issue with it, the so-called nudge unit?
So I think the messaging, it's pretty clearly understood, I think, that in the early days, the government was worried that the population wouldn't listen and therefore maybe kind of over-egged it. I think, the nudge unit's been part of government for 10 years, so its involvement isn't itself kind of sinister thing. And I think some of the things that have been said about it probably overstate its role. I do think the messaging has been, over-alarmist for too long and not connected to the real risks. And even now, we're still hearing messaging on the underground, for example, telling us how everything's been cleaned and surfaces been, dealt with. But we know that's nothing to do with it. But, still the autopilot continues, and we must stop this if we're going to get back to normal.
And then finally, I just wanted to look at all of these really nonsensical rules. So plastic sheet coverings, Scotch eggs, the 10 p.m. curfew, all things that made absolutely no difference to the spread of coronavirus. But the government seemed very addicted to them when actually, surely the focus should have been on the vaccine rollout, the antivirals, things that really made a difference to treating COVID-19 in the vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we knew within a couple of months, obviously, that, the very alarmist opinions about how COVID was transmitted weren't really borne out. And at that point, the government should have stopped some of these, kind of obsessional measures, taping off park benches and so on, that everyone could see were doing far more harm than good. I think it's a good example, actually, what tends to happen in government quite often, that you in coming up with an idea, passing a law, it gets overcomplicated. People try to pin down every situation. They kind of write everything in, and mostly people don't notice that because it's specialist. But COVID affected everyone, and suddenly, we're all exposed to this kind of obsessional trying to tell us what to do the whole time, and it's going to take us a long time to get over this, and we've really got to try hard now.
Lord Frost, stand by. We've got much more from you in just a moment, but also on the way, as unabashed lefty Emily Maitlis steps down from the BBC, Rod Liddell, who came under attack in one of her most egregious and damaging examples of biased broadcasting, reacts. The columnist extraordinaire is back and uncancelled at 10:40. But next, as I just mentioned, we'll have more from the indomitable Lord Frost as he gives his unique insight on Boris Johnson silencing his critics and proving his real leadership to the world on the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Don't miss that and much more straight after this very short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Lord Frost back in just a moment, but let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. And more front pages have just been delivered. The Guardian leads with the state of emergency in Ukraine. More than 3 million Ukrainians were told to leave Russia today as the US warned that Putin was nearly ready to launch a large-scale invasion. This came as Russian diplomats evacuated their embassy in Kiev earlier today, while a massive cyber attack had targeted ministries and banks in the country. And meat eating is apparently linked to a higher risk of cancer, according to the paper. The Daily Telegraph leads on the good news that Rishi Sunak will publicly commit to lowering UK taxes tomorrow, declaring the best way to unleash economic freedom and prosperity is by letting people keep more of their income. Will drop the national insurance hike, I would say. The Eye reports that university students could be forced to pay more for loans, and repayments may last until retirement as part of a so-called lifelong graduate tax. The Times follows the Eye and reports that students could end up paying £100,000 bills for £45,000 loans. The paper writes that loans could last until retirement for some. And in a huge scoop, The Sun reports the crown jewels have been stolen. No, don't worry, not the real ones. I panicked then, but just 200 props from Netflix's The Crown, which have been snatched from 3 lorries near Doncaster. The missing items include a pricey replica of a Russian egg bought by the Queen's grandfather. hell-bent. No stopping Putin, leads the Express. The paper reports that US intelligence believe Vladimir Putin is primed to give the order to advance in the next 24 hours. And the Daily Star quotes Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, who described Vladimir Putin as going full Tonto, plus the tragic news that former On the Buses and EastEnders actor Anna Karen has died aged 85 in a fire in her East London home. In the Daily Mirror, Ukraine warns Russian soldiers welcome to hell, with Kiev calling up 200,000 reservists as war edges closer. But Lord Frost is back with us now with his take on the developments in Russia. And let me bring in my superstar panel too, the Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Patel, the publican and campaigner Adam Brooks, and the political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. Now, Lord Frost, we obviously both agreed with Boris Johnson on lockdown. I think we disagree with him on net zero too and tax rises. But do you agree with me that the PM has actually showed real leadership to the world on this Russia-Ukraine crisis?
Yeah, I do agree. I think the government's doing a pretty good job on the whole and leading opinion across Europe and beyond. I think if we are getting the Europeans a bit more together behind the sanctions programme, then I think the role that the Prime Minister's played in that and the government generally has been really important. So I think they're doing a good job and should stick to it. I mean, what I take from this actually is a bigger point, which is that the world is dangerous, and sometimes we forget this. There are people out there who want to harm us. There's great power competition all the time. We as a country and our friends and allies got to be pushing back against people who want to do us harm, Russia, Iran, China and others. And I worry as a former diplomat that our diplomacy has got a bit kind of posturing and virtue signalling in recent years for the last sort of 10 years or so. And when you do that, you lose ground, you look weak, you seem to be prey to illusions about the world, and that's what the Russians have been seeing. So obviously they're trying it on, and we must now be extremely strong, not just for this crisis, but for whatever comes after.
Couldn't agree more.
I think
Couldn't agree more.
The lesson here.
Amanda Patel, do you have a question for Lord Frost?
Yes, may I call you David?
Of course.
Is that your question?
You're done. Time's up. Next.
You told to make it quick. Do you think that I understand one of the reasons that you left government was because you thought that Boris had stopped being a Tory. Do you think that if he actually scrapped the national insurance tax now, or indicated that he would scrap it very quickly, that would secure his premiership and maybe even secure an electoral victory at the next election?
So I think it would certainly help. It's great that the Chancellor seems to be talking about cutting the tax burden in this speech tomorrow night. But it needs to actually happen. Anybody can talk about it.
When will that be?
And I don't know. And I think it's not just national insurance. There's the corporation tax rise to come in as well. So I think all that should stop. And we need to get back to living within our means and being a low tax party, and that's what brought people into conservatism historically. Whether it secures his premiership, we'll have to see. I think there's a lot to be said on net zero as well, and I think we need to get that into a more sustainable position. But it definitely help. Nobody likes tax rises, and if we could bring ourselves to not do that, it would help a lot.
But we're not. Adam Brooks.
Hello, David. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks again for taking a stand against vaccine passports. I think your resignation really sort of put it up, Boris, in that respect. So thank you. David, did many cabinet ministers ever question the science on the hospitality measures, the damaging measures against hospitality? Or was it possibly sort of a move by stealth to make us less busy during that time?
So I wasn't in every meeting, so I don't know, all the ins and outs of every discussion, obviously. I think hospitality was probably regarded as the area where you could people came into contact most obviously and where it was most easy to kind of police and control, and I think that was part of it. And I think partly we just got into the habit of it, unfortunately. So, sometimes, once again, I think it was just sort of autopilot as much as anything that took the government down that road. But as I say, I don't know for sure. I certainly think for much of last year it had got to a point where the measures were completely disconnected from the actual evidence. And so many people lost businesses, saw their life's work disappear, lost homes, properties, and we seemed a bit kind of tone deaf to this last year, and I think it's a real tragedy.
Well, I certainly tried to highlight that on Twitter. I hope you see. David,
I do.
Can you rule out ever running for PM?
I don't think the country's crying out for another Prime Minister in the Lords. And the last one was Lord Salisbury, I think, 100
No, we need to get you a safe seat. A safe Tory seat. That's what you need.
I'm not a real politician. I think I'd be a terrible MP. So I think I enjoy talking about ideas, and that's what I like doing.
I think many would disagree with that, David.
Daisy McAndrew.
Well, I'm very glad that Adam's asked that question, because I think a lot of people say with your new big Telegraph column and so on that it's, there have been other prime ministers who've had Telegraph columns. I just wanted to go back to what you were saying about Russia and Ukraine and so on. And I completely take the point, separate issue, that you're in favour of low taxes and probably soft touch regulation. But as a former diplomat, you must know, as I'm constantly being told, that other countries find our soft touch on dirty money, particularly in London, really difficult to stomach when it comes to dealing with Russia, and that the rather puny sanctions that Boris Johnson's putting into place are nothing compared to the way that our city, the City of London, and also London, the city and the property market, just throw open the gates and say, bring us your dirty money and wash it. And successive Tory governments and prime ministers have promised to do something, have done absolutely nothing about it.
Well, I think there are two separate questions, obviously, and I think the sanction measures that were taken earlier this week, I think were the right ones, actually. If the Russians do more, and it seems increasingly likely that they might, looking at the TV screens, then there's more in reserve. But you want to keep some sort of incentive for them to avoid the worst. And I think so it's sensible not to kind of fire everything at first go and leave nowhere to go. So I think that made sense. The question of Russian money in the city, it's always been a bit surprising to me that we haven't clamped down a bit more on this over the years. There is a problem that precisely the rule of law in the city that makes it attractive also means that you can't just stop things, throw people out, take away their assets. You have to have a process, and that has to be legal and so on. So
but
that is part of the problem. But all the same,
sorry to interrupt you, Lord Ross, but your colleague in the House of Lords, Lord Fawkes, who was a Conservative minister, has now gone public and said that he was sat on by Number 10 when he was trying to put some of these measures in place, the overseas property documents, that we could see where this money was coming from, and that Number 10 told him to shush and kick it into the long grass.
About the details of that, and there's often much more to these things than people kind of make public, but obviously we must be doing more in the city, and I would totally agree with you on that. We now must, and I think will.
Lord David Frost, it has been such a pleasure to have you here tonight as part of the lockdown inquiry. Thank you for your bold stand and saving us from a completely unnecessary fourth national lockdown. It will not be forgotten. Now, as part of his living with COVID plan, Boris has shrewdly announced that he will end free testing from April the 1st, thereby saving the taxpayer £2 billion per month. Cue the COVID bedwetters doing what they do best, stockpiling like crazy. As the government website ran out of tests last night, some Twitter users were shamelessly gloating about their collections. Probably, don't you think? The same people who have piles of toilet rolls and pasta in their homes even now. And look at this deleted tweet from English dramatist and academic Dan Ribalato, who said, both of us working in education, we test very regularly to protect ourselves and our students. I knew they'd scrap free testing, so I've been ordering test packs whenever I remember, hence the absurd tower in my office. And there we have it, COVID hysteria in action. You're right about one thing, Dan Ribalato. It is absolutely absurd. Now, coming up, the crowning moment of the show as I coronate today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But first, as Emily Maitlis frees the BBC of her lefty partisanship, Rod Liddle, who was a victim of her most egregious and damaging examples of broadcasting bias. The columnist extraordinaire returns in Uncancelled right now, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. After being forced into multiple apologies for expressing left-wing views on air and online, Newsnight presenter Emily Maitlis finally followed my advice to pontificate to her heart's content in the private sector by jumping ship to a radio station LBC. One of the most egregious breaches of impartiality during her tenure at Auntie came in 2019 in a combative and frankly downright nasty interview with friend of the show Rod Liddle.
These are your words. You wrote them. And sorry, have you worked this out between you?
No, it's just what a lot of people think about it. It's just what a lot of people think about it.
You're writing about what this great betrayal it is, that all Brexiteers are portrayed as racist, and then you come up with things saying postal voters in Peterborough thought they were ticking a box to choose a Tarka Dal or a Brinjal Bhaji. I suppose this last comment will be considered racist. It is consistent, casual racism.
That's not casual racism
week
at all.
after week from
it's
you.
Not casual
That's what you trade in. What is it then? I just wonder when it's so consistent, when it's week after week, the bile that you spew up has to be who you are. This kind of stuff.
Maitlis was found in breach of BBC guidelines following an internal investigation for that unjustified attack. Rod, we've missed you these past couple of weeks. Hopefully you haven't suffered from any form of PTSD seeing that little clip. But what news for you to return to? You and I, we no longer have to pay Emily Maitlis' salary.
Yes, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's good news. It's good news for the BBC. It's good news for you and me. It's also good news for Emily Maitlis because she's clearly someone who is incapable of doing her job in an impartial manner, and now she no longer has to. And it was a real problem for the BBC because time after time, and that was just one mild example of the way she completely forgot the rules of the game, that you are meant to at least pretend to be impartial, even if you're not impartial, and no one would believe for a moment that Newsnight has been impartial. And she breached it time and time and time again. And you said at the outset, Dan, that she'd apologised. I haven't heard her apologise once. The BBC has apologised, but Maitlis, who I don't think is terribly bright, is surrounded by this kind of Twitter bubble of people who all agree with her. The left does agree with her. The left doesn't believe that she's impartial because the left cannot see right from wrong. And so she's gone. But there is another problem there. She is, without doubt, a big name within the BBC. And John Sopel, a very good journalist, John Sopel, was the US editor for the BBC, and I worked with him on the Today programme, a very, very talented journalist. He's left as well. Andrew Marr has left. Andrew Neil, of course, they got rid of. Jeremy Clarkson, they got rid of. They are losing one after another their biggest names. And I think they're losing their biggest names and going to these little places like LBC. They're losing their biggest names because they can see the writing on the wall. And that's that, you know, with GBNews, Times Radio, Talk Radio, all the other institutions which have started up and which are offering an intelligent alternative to the BBC's days on news and current affairs are numbered.
I mean, I saw Calvin McKenzie tweet earlier, Rod Liddle, that LBC should be renamed the Lefty Broadcasting Corporation. They're certainly aping the BBC, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, you know, the trouble is with our job, Dan, is that we're working in an industry where a lot of the people who go into it are arts graduates, liberally minded arts graduates. And it's true not only in the BBC. The BBC is a perfect example of it, but you find it everywhere. And so all radio and TV stations have this tendency towards the kind of anodyne, rather unthinking liberal left. Not the hard left, just the kind of whining, persistently boring woke left. That's where most of the media lies, and you know that, Dan. You've worked in the media for a long, long time. We both have. We know about who works in the media, and so yeah, you're right. I think you're right about LBC, which I think it was again a revolt, wasn't it, by the young wokies, the sensitivity readers, who decided that they couldn't bear to hear a different point of view from Nigel Farage, for example. So they got rid of him. And the same things, I suspect, happened at the BBC. They didn't want Jeremy Clarkson, or Paxman for that matter. They didn't want Andrew Neil. All voices, not really from the right, just a different voice to their own. They can't bear it. That's the big difference between the liberal left and I don't mean the whole left, but the liberal left and the rest of us, which is that we can tolerate dissent, tolerate other opinions. They simply can't.
Rod Liddell, so great to have you back. We'll speak again next week. Thank you so much. But it is time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel back with me. Your nominee, Amanda Patel, for Greatest Britain.
It's got to be the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate, out there in Denmark, doing a great job, having fun. Message to Meghan, you don't have to be a misery guts, and the royal family is not a prison cell.
Adam Brooks, your nominee.
Greatest Britain is the late Jamal Edwards for changing youth culture and the British music scene for the better.
Well, both Jamal and Kate have been Greatest Britons of mine this week. So, Daisy, give me something new, please. Give me something new.
I just loved Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, saying that Vladimir Putin had gone tonto, gone the full tonto.
Yes.
It made me chuckle. And
I'm with you there. I'm with you. Ben Wallace, our Greatest Britain, but only because Kate and the brilliant late, great Jamal already have been. Union Jackass time, Amanda Patel.
He's not British, but he beheaded or wrote off the Queen. This idiot from this Hollywood Unlocked website in America who announced they had a royal exclusive.
Yeah, Jason Lee, and it was just utter rubbish.
Off with
rubbish. Off with his head. Yes, Adam Brooks.
It's Keir Starmer for always opposing the lifting of restrictions and always getting proven wrong every time he does it.
And terrible. Daisy, your nominee.
That Russian mouthpiece, Alex Salmond, for continuing to present his own show on RT, formerly known as Russia Today.
Do you know what? I actually love all of those nominees. I've got to go with Amanda, though. Jason Lee killed off the Queen incorrectly, and he won't apologise for it. Shame on you. Amanda Patel, Adam Brooks, Daisy McAndrew, my superstar panel tonight. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next week. And thank you for your company tonight. I'm back tomorrow at 9 p.m. Headliners is next. Good night.
Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your weather forecast. Over the next 24 hours, we've got snow and lightning across Scotland. That's going to be the main feature of our weather. And for all of us, it is going to be turning a lot colder. This cold front is sinking its way southwards across the UK, bringing much colder air. And where we've got this occluded front, that's where we're going to see some frequent and heavy showers with the risk of lightning. So let's take a look at the picture through Wednesday evening. Got some heavy rain on the cold front as it sinks its way through England and Wales. Some lively bursts of rain to come for a time. The colder air is coming in behind, so it's across Scotland and Northern Ireland where the weather warning is in place that we'll see frequent snow showers. We could see as much as 10 to 20 centimetres building up over the hills and mountains of Scotland. Temperatures sub-zero and feeling a lot colder in that wind. And they'll continue through much of the day. Those frequent showers pushing their way in as the rain clears away from southeastern areas. Elsewhere then, brightening up through the day, but further showers will push their way through. There'll be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and snow across the country. But as I say, the most frequent snow showers likely to be across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brisk winds as well means blizzards across those mountains, so some tricky conditions here. Temperatures a lot lower than recent days, and it stays cold and wintry through the first part of Thursday night. We'll see this another feature coming southwards, so we could see some snow over the Pennines, perhaps North Wales. But later on into the small hours of Friday, we'll start to see those winds easing down. The skies will clear, showers will tend to become fewer and further between. So a touch of frost first thing on Friday morning. Lots of sunshine out there, though, on Friday morning. Still a few showers in the mix, but they'll be easing their way off into the North Sea. And for most of us, under a ridge of high pressure through Friday, it looks to be a much calmer day. Light winds, temperatures not faring too bad, still on the chilly side. But I think as we go through the day, there'll be plenty of sunshine. And it stays dry across the south. Chance of rain further north over the weekend. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.